Well, I'd like to begin tonight by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Every day when I look up at Kunyani, I'm reminded of what a privilege it is for us to live on this beautiful island of the Tele. And I would like to acknowledge the ongoing resilience of the Tasmanian Aboriginal people. I'd also like to acknowledge our VIPs tonight. I mean, everyone here is a VIP. Thank you. But I'd just like to acknowledge a few. And the first one is the Minister for Human Services and the Minister for Housing, the Honourable Minister Jaensch MP, who will speak to us all later and take suggestions. Alison Standard, Member for Franklin. Your Honourable Josh Woolley, Member for Elwick. Ella Haddad, Member for Clark, who's joining us online. The Leader of the Tasmanian Greens, Cassie O'Connor. The Honourable Meg Webb, Member for Nelson. Commissioner for Children and Young People, Leanne McLean. Our Board President, Alex McKenzie, who's also joining us online tonight. TasCOSS Treasurer, John Stubley. And Board Members, Connie DeGolis and Jacinda Armstrong. Also TasCOSS Life members, Kath McLean and Chris Jones, who are also joining online. And of course to all our valued members and supporters. When I walked through the TasCOSS doors in mid-June this year, it was an absolute pleasure for me to reconnect with many of you who I've worked with before, and also to meet many of you for the very first time. You'd all weathered the storm of the Tasmanian lockdown during COVID-19, and many of you were starting to make arrangements for many. I just noticed someone back. You know, I won't say who. We're trying to work it out. You all weathered the storm of the Tasmanian lockdown during COVID-19, and many of you were starting to make arrangements to set up safety plans and to get back to offices and workplaces around the state. I've always been very committed to working in the community services industry. It directly aligns with my values. And I want to tell you that I couldn't have been more prouder at that moment when I walked through the TasCOSS door of how our industry, our Tasmanian community services industry, responded to the COVID-19 crisis. We were out there on the front line from the very start, reorganising paid staff and volunteers, adapting service delivery models, work plans, office arrangements and so on, to ensure that all Tasmanians got the assistance they needed and knew they could ask for. As an industry, we had the needs of Tasmanians at the very centre of everything we did. We were adaptable, flexible, and able to identify service gaps and changing needs, while also taking care of our own paid staff and volunteers. But we were also collaborating with fellow service organisations and developing innovative partnerships with industry, sporting clubs and many others to make sure that support, food and assistance were readily available. A key part of the statewide emergency response was our industry's contribution to the State Control Centre through the Recovery Partners Network. And while TasCOSS took on the role of coordinating the communication between the industry and the Control Centre, it was all of you that made it work so well. And I really want to acknowledge your contribution to that. There's no doubt that 2020 has brought with it many, many challenges. I think every single one of us has been affected in some way during this pandemic. But at the same time, I've been inspired and energised to see how our industry responded so strongly and compassionately, and how closely we've pulled together across industry and sectors with a common purpose of supporting Tasmanians. In fact, engagement with each other across organisations and with government remains extremely high even now. And this is a clear indication of our determination to support as many Tasmanians as we can as we move into the rebuilding period. I think this health crisis did something else. And this has been acknowledged by thought leaders, by writers and politicians around the globe as being of great value. What it's done is it's shifted governments from investing as if a healthy economy provides a good life for people to openly acknowledging that a healthy population is the essential ingredient of a healthy economy. In Tasmania, we saw this shift in the priority given to the actions taken by state government to preserve the health and safety of our friends, family and community, with economic considerations being secondary. This is a noticeable difference in focus and an acknowledgement that investment in our greatest asset, our people, sits at the heart of Tasmania's successful recovery, rebuild and increased resilience. And while this might not have seemed earth-shattering or an earth-shattering revelation, we mustn't lose sight of the value of prioritising the health and well-being of our people. And now is the time for investment in people, for investment in the known solutions to the entrenched issues that have been a handbrake on Tasmania's prosperity. Now is the time to raise our bottom line, to make lack of affordable housing a thing of the past, to raise our adult digital literacy rates, and to ensure that every Tasmanian has the opportunity to live a good life. And if not now, then when? Recently, a woman shared a story with us at TasCOSS, and it was a story of living life on the outer, or living on a pittance, as she called it. And this woman is in her 40s, and she's recently returned to Tasmania to look after her sick mother. She spoke with us about her aspirations for the future, or her lack thereof, and the elation that she felt when she was able to purchase a new chainsaw as a business investment, because she'd been selling firewood from her home. And this was only possible by the short-lived increase to social security payments. In particular, she said this: once your mind's not worried, you can sleep. You can actually get everything else in order. You can start to make some better decisions for yourself, not having to worry if you've got to make it through the fortnight and still have food. Being able to look forward to the week and put energy into other things and start to create a future. This story is one of many that we hear at TasCOSS, and I'm sure many of you hear similar stories. And it's part of our focused research on how Tasmania is struggling to make ends meet to find a good life. And what this research has told us so far, and it's probably not surprising, but it's that the majority of us define a good life as a broad mix of social and economic opportunities and outcomes. But no matter our economic circumstances or what postcode we come from, we share a desire to be connected to family, to friends and to community. Also to feel supported and safe, and to be able to contribute to our communities through paid work or volunteer activities. No Tasmanian would accept some of the pre-COVID measures of our wellbeing, such as the average 56-week wait for priority social housing as being good enough. And the same can be said for statistics around elective surgery waiting lists, youth unemployment, underemployment rates, and the ability of our people to access affordable primary health care. To tackle these poor outcomes in a meaningful way, we look to our government to prioritise investment in a strong, healthy population as the essential core of a robust and vibrant economy. While the budget before us today is chiefly an accounting for the investments made during the COVID-19 emergency response, there are some key principles that we want to be looking for that underpins the government's priorities. We're looking for assurance that our government is taking the opportunity presented by the COVID-19 disruption to plan to far exceed the old normal. We're seeking a reset in the value attributed to a healthy population as the key driver of a healthy economy. And we're looking for a reimagined approach to measuring success through wellbeing indicators. So for now, I just want to start to conclude these remarks by returning to where we started. And that's about the sense of pride I felt in witnessing how deftly our industry shifted to provide support for Tasmanians where and when it is needed throughout the health crisis. Post-COVID-19 data is telling us that growth in our industry is among the least impacted by the economic recession. Estimates project 1,600 new jobs will be created across our industry in each of the next 3 years. We have come a long way in our perceptions of our industry during the past couple of decades. Even calling ourselves an industry is a discomforting change for many of us. But the fact is that we do legitimately sit with Tasmania's other industry sectors. We invest funding into services that deliver social and economic dividends for Tasmania and improve the lives of Tasmanians. While the COVID-19 crisis interrupted the finalisation of the 10-year Community Services Industry Plan, we are very soon will be reconvening this steering committee, and we will hope to finalise the industry plan over the next few weeks. With that said, we'll now turn to the details of the budget as we've interpreted it, because obviously we've only had a couple of hours since the end of lockdown until now, but we've managed to, I think, capture most of the key outcomes of the budget today. Really a great deal of the budget has been announced, and some of it was obviously announced much earlier in the year. But in the interest of brevity, we haven't included all of the announcements that happened earlier in the year on today's slides, but I'd encourage you to go to the State Government's coronavirus website if you want to see the full list. And we'll send out the link along with the presentation slides tomorrow. So what you'll see on the slides is the announcement of funding made in the lead up to today's budget, so the last couple of weeks, along with additional information that we found out today in the lockup. Okay, here we go. Time for a break. So we've sort of tried to theme up some of the announcements today rather than just sort of giving you a big shopping list. And the first thing that we've done is around what we've called affording the basics. So under these announcements, the government's decision to bring forward and provide new funding under the affordable housing strategy is acknowledgement that too many Tasmanians are going without safe and affordable housing. So the spending, as you know, is part of the $3.1 billion construction blitz, albeit only a small part of that. And we welcome the government's additional investment into key programs to address homelessness. I think in recognition of the need to help more Tasmanians seek safe overnight accommodation, the budget's also allocating $16.8 million to continue the successful State Safe Space program that was commenced during the pandemic. And this additional funding will allow the program to run through to June 2022 with a 24/7 wraparound service as well. This one's around food security, and this has really became obviously a really big issue during the pandemic. We saw the increased reliance on emergency relief. We didn't see we did see some really good investment in emergency relief in the budget, and you can see that $1.6 million for those organisations, which is fantastic. We didn't see a strategic approach to food security, but we understand that there's mapping that's occurring over the next sort of few weeks and months, and that we can expect to see a more strategic approach to food security in the May budget, which will be great to look forward to. This one's around energy, and the measures to assist Tasmanians struggling with huge energy costs while they're in lockdown in their homes over winter was obviously very, very welcome, and we certainly want to encourage the government to make some of these measures permanent, particularly things like the no electricity disconnections. Digital inclusion, blank. This was probably the one that we were disappointed about, and I think over COVID, what we saw that those people that were digitally excluded really struggled to connect with their learning from home, with essential services, with looking for work. And we also know that Tasmania has the lowest level of digital inclusion in the country. So we really want to encourage the government to consider how we can strategically invest in digital inclusion, and also ensuring that all Tasmanians have the skills that they need to access digital services, as well as it being affordable. This one was around transport. So there was the funding for Learner Driver mentor program, which was good, and changes to the graduated licensing system. Also, as we've got here, new today's $500 million for establishing reliable, sustainable and cost-effective transport systems. I think the funding for the Learner Driver mentor programs really is making the process of getting the licence much simpler. It's been very, very welcome. So the next theme that we have, the next section, is around learning for life. There are a lot of announcements both before today and also today that many of you may have seen. I think there was a media release out today with a lot of these. Some significant investment, and we really welcome the adult learning strategy funding, because we know that low literacy and numeracy are barriers to participation as much as half of the Tasmanian population. One's around employment. $5 billion infrastructure program intended to underpin an estimated 25,000 jobs. We were very pleased to see that Smiths and Hamlet job programs for young people have been supported, and as it's the extension of the payroll tax rebates to encourage employers to take on young workers and apprentices. So that's really pleasing to see that. They're obviously very effective programs. Next one's around feeling safe and supported. So we know that there were a range of government COVID-19 responses, particularly in those early days of the pandemic. And there were a range of measures to support individuals that the government did, and particularly supporting individuals, households and our community, such as enhanced child safety and wellbeing system, establishing the under 16 homelessness working group, funding for Why Not for Youth COVID-19 information campaign, and doubling the ticket to play vouchers. It was pleasing to see some investment in Aboriginal affairs in today's budget, as well as some investment in women and understanding the particular impact that COVID-19 crisis has had on women, particularly in areas of employment. Obviously, volunteers were pretty hard hit during COVID, with a lot of volunteers needing to down tools and take to their home and not able to engage in their community activities. So as the former CEO of Volunteering Tas, I'm obviously particularly pleased to see the recognition of volunteers as the unpaid workforce making a really significant contribution socially and economically to Tasmania. We're also pleased to see longer-term funding for our community services, our community legal services, who have been without funding certainty year on year for a very long time. And we hope this will be the start of longer-term contracts for these groups. Just moving to healthy body and mind. So the announcement many of you would have seen on Friday, the government made the announcement of our healthcare future, which is a really strategic approach to getting better patient outcomes across Tasmania. And it's about how we can connect and rebalance care delivery across the state, bringing it closer where people live and into the communities rather than just creating more hospital beds. So we're really excited to be engaging in this reform process, and I'd like to encourage all of our members and stakeholders to visit the website and participate in the consultation on improving the delivery of healthcare and services across our communities. We're also pleased to see a boost in the state's elective surgery capacity, and that will deliver an additional 8,500 elective surgeries over the next 18 months. And the Tasmanian Government has also boosted telehealth services at a time when it's needed the most. And I think that was one of the really big key learnings for a lot of us over COVID-19, not just discovering Zoom and Microsoft Teams as a way of not having to do face-to-face meetings, but that we could actually deliver some essential services on phone as well, on phone and on. In the area of mental health, the government's investing $4 million to implement the recommendations of the CAMS review, all of which have been accepted. And as part of the recently announced $20 million COVID-19 small sustainable recovery assistance package, $1 million will go towards mental health support for Tasmanian small businesses in recognition of the financial and mental health impact of COVID-19 on both small businesses and all of their employees. Some key takeaways for the community services industry. So we had that pre-announcement of equal remuneration order, which was really pleasing, and I know it has meant a lot to many organisations. Also the indexation for peak bodies, which has been retrospective to July 2019. TasCOSS was very fortunate to receive some funding today, and that's about doing some joined up recovery. So similar to what we did during the pandemic, where we were able to sort of bring the sector together and deliver some outcomes. Some bit nil scheme, yay! 1 million to support more Tasmanians. Kept that very close to my chest. Yesterday. Also, Palliative Care Tasmania, $1 million to support families in their dealings with the Guardianship and Administration Board. Additional funding of $160,000, which was announced last year, of $320 for a range of organisations, including family planning, women's health, the link, pregnancy counselling support and support Tasmania. Cancer Council received $500,000. I understand that's the first time they've ever received state government funding, and I know they were very pleased to receive that to support their service delivery. You know, they've had significant impact without being able to do their fundraising over the last few months. As well as that $4.9 million reform agenda for the AOD, and $8 million for community healthcare initiatives. So some other key announcements have been, particularly today, we saw 45 economic and social response, so the PESRAC committee. And I guess what we'd like to do is just encourage the government to consider using some of the PESRAC funds to introduce digital inclusion measures, perhaps starting with a telecommunications concession for low-income Tasmanian households. And that brings us to an end of our wrap-up. But just before I introduce the Minister, who will also talk to you about today's budget and take some questions, I really want to take this opportunity to thank you all, our members and supporters. As you know, TasCOSS focuses on working with our members to advocate for those who are disadvantaged and those who are living in poverty. Our voice is only strong because our members support us and our mission. You give your time, your expertise and your scarce resources to support our work. And when TasCOSS stands with a strong and united industry, we make real progress in our goal of achieving social justice in Tasmania. I'd now like to hand over to the Minister for Human Services and the Minister for Housing, the Honourable Jaensch. Welcome, Roger. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Adrienne. Ladies and gentlemen, I acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal people as the traditional and original owners and continuing custodians of this land on which we gather today, which always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And I pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. I also acknowledge Alex, Adrienne, the Commissioner, my parliamentary colleagues, and the whole TasCOSS family that's gathered here again today. And isn't it great to be able to do that? And it's been such a long time. And in the noise and hubbub before we started this formal proceeding, I could see people reconnecting who've been Zooming and teaming with each other intensively throughout this remarkable year, enjoying being in the room together, sitting down, suitably safely distanced, having a glass of wine. Isn't it wonderful to be able to do that again? And this is the first time I've ever been Ausland, and I'm having a little fan moment because there's so now I've got that out of the way. This is the part of the speech where someone's bound to say, or be tempted to say, and what a year it's been. So I'm going to avoid or resist that. Instead, I just want to say thank you. Very much along the lines that Adrienne expressed, for responding so quickly and so instinctively to challenges we had never seen before, and for knowing your clients and your communities so well that when government reached out to you to help, you knew exactly what to do. And I think that probably saved lots of lives this year. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. And that working together with people who know their patch, their capabilities, and the needs of their clients well is the message, I think, that we've tried to weave into this budget. It's about that working together, but working towards strong and resilient and active and well communities of people who together can overcome things. And working with this industry is something I think we've had a remarkable opportunity to do intensively this year and build bonds and trust and understanding and knowledge of each other that will stand us in good stead through whatever comes next. So to this end, our budget includes more funding to ensure that we can effectively recover from the setbacks that this year's pandemic has caused. Many of the initiatives, as Adrienne has said, have already been announced and they've already commenced, or we hope by now, because we needed them. They couldn't wait. Some are also new, and I'm not going a more complete list than Adrienne's already put up on the board. But I want to pick a few things out and speak a little bit more about them, particularly in my portfolios. And when it comes to question time, I brought 3 bodyguards with me at the back who double as advisors, who will take notes when we get to something that's outside my portfolio area where there's an interest in the room, and do some follow-up and get you answers. So in my areas of responsibility in particular, in children and youth services, we've got $1 million over 2 years into child safety initiatives as part of the in enhancing the services and systems that support and safety. Additional funding went into key areas to support carers, enhance our child safety after hours capacity in particular, and bolster the therapeutic residential care system and the capacity there. Also included in the budget is the $200,000 funding that we announced and committed to support the development of an informal kinship carer, liaison and support function. And there's an ongoing body of work there as well, as we come to recognise and understand that larger group of people who sit outside the formal child safety system, but who are an important buffer to it and an important safety net for young people in those kin networks. And we need to understand their needs for support better, and there's work underway now that will inform our policy approach to that going forward. We're also providing additional support for young people under 16 at risk of homelessness with $513,000 to increase the capacity of various organisations to reach out and provide intensive and earlier case management, outreach support, mediation and reunification. And there is continued significant investment in out-of-home care, not new initiatives necessarily, but an increasing investment to recognise increasing demand, unfortunately, in that sector. Included in the budget provisions there, we will also be drawing funding to invest in the investigation and development of a new therapeutic on-country program for young people here in Tasmania, which was referenced in the recommendations from the review of the Many Colours One Direction program, which we recently handed down. We also continue our significant redevelopment program at Hadley Youth Detention Centre, which is entering the construction phase very soon, and our long-term investment in the reforms, the Strong Family Safe Kids reforms in child safety. Importantly, as Adrienne touched on, the budget also includes a $4 million investment into the reform of child and adolescent mental health services that my colleague, Minister Jaensch, announced, and importantly, for the out-of-home care sector, this includes $1.8 million for a dedicated, specialised CAMS service for children in out-of-home care as well. Yesterday in Parliament, I was pleased to announce that the budget also includes $1.2 million across forward estimates as part of our commitment to the Closing the Gap Refresh initiative, which takes a different approach to what previous Closing the Gap programs nationally have taken, with a strong focus on building the capacities of Aboriginal community-controlled organisations to play a greater role in the delivery of services to their own people who they know better than anybody else in the world. So that closing the gap can be something which is informed by people who experience it. And again, I say to the people in this room who are in our industry, our social services industry, I think that this provides a range of exciting new opportunities for service providers to partner with local Aboriginal community organisations, to partner with them and to harness the power of their knowledge of their communities and their last mile connections to people in need who may have been part of the gap in the past, to enhance the way that your services reach them and hit the ground, and to build their capacity as a partner in delivery of those services right across our state and nationally. And I look forward to your engagement in some of the round tables that we'll be holding before the end of the year, where we're going to be bringing information to the table with government, with Aboriginal community organisations and existing mainstream service providers to face the gap, to name it, put a number on it, and build a plan for how we close it for our Aboriginal communities. So I look forward to engagement with this industry on that. Again, I was very, very pleased that today's budget was able to include over $300 million for housing and homelessness services for Tasmanians in need. This includes the new $100 million investment that was announced earlier in the pandemic as part of our stimulus construction blitz response, but which will deliver 1,000 new homes over 3 years that we desperately need. That EOI process is currently underway, and I'm sure there are participants from that in the room, and I thank you for responding so swiftly and partnering so widely across the state to bring forward proposals, and we look forward to contracting additional 1,000 homes for Tasmanians in coming months. There's also, as Adrienne has pointed out, $16.8 million to continue the Safe Space program. And I've got to thank Hobart City Mission, and John's here today, good on you, Launceston City Mission and the Salvos for their work around the state to develop that program and to continue to evolve it. The extra funding and time frame is not for the program necessarily just to keep running as it is, but to continue to evolve as we understand the needs of different cohorts in different parts of the state, but offer them safe places and the wraparound supports and connections and referrals to help them break the cycle of homelessness. It's a wonderful initiative. It's been fantastic to have, in a strange way, it's been great to have the need and the opportunity at the same time to experiment with some different modes of providing those services. And I look forward to what we evolve from it, John. So I thank you very much for your leadership of that work. Our second affordable housing action plan also receives further investment, and some of the initiatives that have been part of the plan for some time, but which are now receiving their share of budgets for delivery include $10 million for a new Hobart youth foyer and its operation, $22 million for new supported accommodation around Hobart, the delivery of Huntingfield, 470 residential lots that the industry needs right now to build more homes on because housing land is becoming short in some areas. $5 million for a new Launceston Youth at Risk Centre, $4.6 million for Magnolia House, $5.6 to expand Vine House and transition it to a youth foyer model, and more than $10 million for a new Burnie Youth Foyer, including its operations, and $2 million to deliver a Northwest men's shelter, which I understand is likely to be the Devonport area. I just want to comment quickly on these youth foyers because they go to some of these areas that I think Adrienne was going to, that it's not just about the shelter, not just about the roof, the bed. The youth foyers, both the new ones that are being built and the transitions that we're trying to achieve with some of the existing ones, will build on this idea that there are young people who may be facing homelessness who need somewhere to live and stay, for sure, but they also need life skills and they need support and mentoring in their education and training so that by the time they reach adulthood and they're ready for independence, they do so with a complete education, with a qualification, with the skills to live independently and a reference as a good tenant, and thus equipped, they're better able to go out into the world and face some of the challenges of competing then for their next steps and being able to live good lives independently. These are the new youth foyers that we're establishing. We've got one in Devonport, which is at Everline House, which has been doing great work. And I think Anglican for their work there, as well as TAFE, which has a special relationship there, and Loaves and Fishes to the networks. We're going to try and replicate that in Burnie with relationships with Hadley College and TAFE in Burnie, as well as part of that precinct up there, and a new site as well in Hobart. So stand by for more news on those very innovative partnerships that again deliver more than just the roof over people's heads, but the means to live independently as well. Our housing debt waiver program will continue to deliver. We aim to assist 400 households with that. There's delivery of 300 new social housing dwellings as part of that program, and the vast majority of those are now either under construction or being contracted and scheduled for delivery within the target time frame. We've co-funded the purchase of the Balmoral motor inn at Goodwood, again with Hobart City Mission, and also invested from that housing debt waiver into the refurbishment of the Oakley Court unit complex, which has been very much welcomed, as I understand it, by the residents there as we turn that into a social housing complex more directly aimed at older Tasmanians in need of assistance with ageing in place as well in those more modern facilities. The $15 million initiative, the new initiative announced in the budget today, will see us complete the government's refurbishment and replacement of older inefficient heating in public housing and conclude that program. When we came to government, it was less than 20% of our public housing had efficient heating in it. It's now over 70%. We're going to take that to 100% through this initiative. And we will start to roll out that energy efficient reverse cycle hot water heating system as well to progressively replace older, less efficient systems. Now these are dramatically going to change people's power bills and keep real money in people's pockets. What they do with that's up to them, but it gives them greater ability to choose and purchase and make good choices for themselves and their families. And if we can conclude that program, it will also have the benefit of reducing some of that longer term housing maintenance backlog, and it will also have the benefit of putting the work for suppliers and installers of those sorts of systems into postcodes right across the state, and doing it through our public housing stock gives us the ability to control how that happens to some extent. So that it doesn't become a pink bat system, but that it is targeted to be able to provide that sort of local income as well, and jobs for people right across the state when they need them most. I could go on, but I won't. You've been very patient with me. $634 million in this budget for the Department of Communities Tasmania to continue to fund a wide range of peak bodies and service organisations and direct delivery of services to Tasmanians. Now, these are just some of our funding commitments that we've made during what's probably been the most difficult budget environment in Tasmania's history. And I'm really proud of the central role, as you said before, Adrienne, that our social services sector, I'm now going to call it an industry, that the central role that this industry has played in responding to the emergency and working with government to keep our most vulnerable people safe and connected and cared for during this uncertain time. And we need to continue because we're not out of this yet. It's not over. Our operating environment will continue to be challenging and changing for us as organisations and for people who access our services. But thanks to the work that we've all done and the changes we've made and the new partnerships and networks and the innovations that we've created to deal with these new challenges that are reflected in this budget, I think we're better placed than ever before to deliver for vulnerable Tasmanians. And I thank you again for your remarkable achievements and efforts this year. I look forward to continuing to work closely together with you as we deal with whatever comes next. Thank you.
I think it's really pleasing to hear you talk about the community services industry in that way. And recognise the contribution that we have made. And I think the other word I heard you use earlier was partnership, and how really government, community services industry, other industries have worked so closely together. We've had that common purpose and we've been galvanised to really make a difference for Tasmanians. And the other thing that I really kind of noticed in your speech was just when you were talking about the youth boilers and recognising that it's not just about building stuff, or having structures, but it's about the people delivering them and really being able to, you know, have wraparound services and be able to make a real difference for those people. So we're actually going to now open up to some questions. And I'd just like to remind you that the question time is for TasCOSS members and stakeholders, so please feel free to ask your questions. We've also got some people joining us online today. So if there's any questions that come via Zoom, I think Cameron will also read those out for us. So if you have any questions, I think this is actually the roving mic, so it's a multi-purpose mic. That's my one. Yeah, great.
Thank you, Minister. I know it's not your portfolio, but I'll be keen to hear what the Tasmania government has in store for older job seekers, because there seems to be a lot of emphasis on youth unemployment. We missed out with the federal budget, and I'm really concerned about mature age job seekers in this environment.
Thank you, Sue. This one should be okay. Cool. Thank you, and Sue, I will make sure that we follow up with my colleagues and get you any additional information that I can regarding older job seekers and assistance for them. What I have been seeing though is that there are different parts of our economy that are recovering or who have actually flourished under the conditions of the last 6 months or so. They have widely differing needs and some gaps in terms of the workforce that they require. There have been, and so I believe that one of the things that we need to be doing is mapping in more detail the workforce requirements of our economy as we emerge from COVID, because I think it will surprise us where there is a demand for skill sets and types of employees that we may not have anticipated and might be different to before we went into the pandemic. It's quite possible that there will need to be a call out for people with different skill sets and experience, and that should be able to tap into the whole population, including older and more experienced people. And been interesting on, take the example of the agricultural seasonal workers, how the call went out, twice as many Tasmanians signed up to work in agricultural harvesting roles over this coming season than last year. An extra 3,000 people responded to that call. And I think it was a really interesting exercise to actually say, here's what we need, this is how you get into it, this is what you need to be able to take advantage of this opportunity. And Tasmanians responded really well. And so if there are sectors and areas of experience that we're finding that we've got skills gaps and we need more people on the ground, and there are sectors who are saying that right now, and we put that call out, I would hope that there would be experienced Tasmanians out there who would see an opportunity for themselves. If there are other areas of assistance or incentive that are being contemplated, I'll find out more about them.
Thanks, Minister. Any other questions? Yeah. I think you say your name to the organisation.
It's Jaensch.
I'm Jamie Bladel, I'm the CEO of Kickstart Arts. I'm kind of like the art person in the room.
We're very happy.
I'm the arts organisation in the community sector, community industry, social service industry. Anyway, my question is: I have on my iPhone here a press release from the Arts Minister, which says, I am also pleased to announce that we will provide $1 million over 2 years, which is $500,000 a year, to support a brand new program of community arts and cultural development to deliver long-term improvements in social health and wellbeing through partnerships between the arts and community sectors. Does the community sector know about this, and are they going to be able to bring something to match that money, if not double it, because that's what it's going to take?
Clearly, because it's on your phone and you've mentioned it here, the industry does know about it now. I don't have a lot more information on that for you, Jamie, but it sounds very much like some of the things that we were talking about before we commenced this evening would be the sorts of initiatives that we're looking for. But Simon, at the back of the room, will get you some more information on that directly. And And certainly if there's feedback that we need to invest in that program before it is fully formed and launched, that to help it hit its mark, we welcome that.
Great.
Do you know about the details of that investment?
Yeah, well,
Just because in the budget papers, there's quite a section on the arts, so I'm just thinking, might have.
yeah, I do have the
Chat.
details.
Yeah,
And there's also the PES rate may feed into that as well. And I'm hoping it does. If there's any forum that, you know, I can contribute to, I'll be very happy to.
Thank you.
Be involved.
Thanks.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Stephen Nicholson. I'm from Expression Australia. I've just got two questions. I have raised this with the Tasmanian government before. I'm thinking of people over 65 who aren't eligible for the NDIS, and that's fine. That's not a point of contention at all. But for deaf people, visual, vibrating smoke alarms. In the past, we had a smoke alarm program that was funded to make these devices cheaper for people. That no longer exists. So as people age, they tend to need more devices or more equipment to support them. So my concern is people over 65, access to equipment, and then replacing that equipment when it needs replacing. Smoke alarms with a flashing light and a vibrating pad with over $600. And also access to interpreting services in the community services sector or anywhere else for families, for people who aren't eligible for the NDIS. They're my questions for tonight, and I'm happy to discuss it further.
Thank you very much, Stephen. You introduced yourself. Everybody in the room knows who you are. You're famous now. And thank you for your service in getting the Premier's messages through and the public health messages through over this last year. It's been terrific. And in and of itself, you doing that, I think, has created a conversation and awareness of hearing impaired people and probably laid great groundwork for questions like the one you just asked about. What about for people as they age, people with hearing difficulties, and how they participate in things like staying safe in their homes and through fire seasons as well. I suppose there's a part of that as well. I'm very happy to raise the issue that you put with Ministers Rockcliffe and Shelton, so the Ministers responsible for disability services, and Minister Shelton as the Minister for Police, Fire and Emergency Services as well, because I think that if I tell them that Stephen says we need assistance for vibrating without smoke alarms in our homes, they'll listen. And thank you very much for raising it.
Thanks, Minister. We'll look forward to the outcome of that discussion. Are there any just one or two questions before we finish?
Minister, you mentioned additional funding for demand in out-of-home care, and I'm wondering if any of that funding is allocated to prevention, and particularly in respect to educare or intensive family engagement services to try and prevent children from coming into the foster care system.
Yep. The line items that relate to demand for out-of-home care don't directly, but those that refer to the programs which are about the Strong Family Safe Kids certainly do. In terms of continuation of intensive family engagement services and the operation of the advice and referral line and the earlier interventions to assist families to stay together where it's safe to do so and result in fewer young people entering the out-of-home care system entirely. That trajectory continues, and we're looking now very much at the next stages of that reform process as well. certainly in terms of preventing kids or having fewer young people enter into the out-of-home care system, but also for those who do enter it, how we are making better decisions earlier with them about their placements and achieving stability and permanency wherever we can for them, so we have children, fewer children who are moving through multiple different placements and carers and having that repeated disruption to their lives and development. So that's part of the next chapter. Certainly what we've learned through the first stages with things like ICE, we'll build on that learning and continue that work.
Thank you. We've got a question on Zoom.
Yeah, it's not come through here. I've got one voice, so don't worry about the microphone. We got, will there be provision for cultural diverse support and training for volunteers and workers? And this secondary goes with what Stephen said. Will there be additional funding access for interpreter services? Another question here would go. Do you want to answer up that first?
No, you give me the next one.
Give the next one, and I'll notice. All right. Minister, thank you for your acknowledgement of the sector saving lives. Unpaid family carers played a significant role in flattening the curve by stepping up and locking down homes to protect the most vulnerable. Yet despite Carers Tasmania submitting a budget request based on COVID survey data that identified carer needs in the budget, there was no funding for digital inclusion. The majority of carers are aged over 65 years and significantly less than the scroll.
I can make a start. In terms of your first question regarding cultural diversity and interpreter services and increased funding for those, I'll get some information on that from Mr. Lockwood, whose portfolio areas that relates to. If you can make sure that we've identified the person asking the question, we can channel the answer that through TasCOSS to there. On the second question regarding digital inclusion, I noticed a blank screen that you had up here. I acknowledge that and will certainly follow that up with Minister Ferguson. But what I do know as well is that there are a range of programs that I'm aware of, or a range of avenues, particularly as we went into the early stages of the pandemic response and schools were closing and more young people were needing to be supported in their education at home, that through a range of mechanisms there was considerable investment made in giving the means to do so, both in terms of devices as well as data as well, particularly around the need for them to be able to access education, but also in terms of our connectivity with them where they are children in out-of-home care, for example, and the need to have a new sort of interface. NILS is another program I think that John told me about how a significant proportion of the increased investment through NILS through this time has gone to devices and
150% rise during that quarter.
150% rise during the quarter, exactly. And I think that through education department there was also investment. So there have been elements of investment in the capacity. It's not the same as a fully strategic approach to digital inclusion, but maybe it will have dealt with some of the capital side of things and the capacity to access that we can build on now with the next stages of digital inclusion strategies.
It'd be great to continue those conversations because, as you say, there's been some investment, so what we need to do is to be strategic.
Yes, exactly.
It worked okay how we broke it into two. The second part of that question, Minister Jaensch, is around what do carers make of this budget? For instance, there's no money for young carers in schools, no funding to subsidise employers or pathways to employment for carers. Can you just comment a little bit around in the general COVID recovery, what can we point to for carers?
And if I could just say, we'll make this our last question. Okay. See, lots of people need to go.
No, look, the question to start off is what do carers make of the budget? That's what I'm here for, as well as to hear back what people make of the budget. And as carers themselves, their peak bodies and advocacy groups digest the content of the budget, ask questions, get answers. We're very happy to hear the feedback. And what do carers make of the budget? What do people who are cared for make of the budget and what's in it? And what remains underfunded or in need of more policy responses in the future? No budget is able to cover everything forever. We're in a very interesting time in terms of what has risen to the top of priorities. There's certainly a couple of notes I've taken from the discussion here today, particularly around digital inclusion, vibrating smoke alarms, and career paths and training and support for carers and young carers in particular, that I'll take note of, and I'll listen for more detail on those from people who know the detail and feed that back into the system.
Now, I said that was the last question, but actually, there's just one more that's just been slipped in. So,
okay, and it is just a question I normally hate people who do this kind of thing, but I think it's a really important point to make. And I also recognise it's not your portfolio, Minister Jaensch, so thank you. But on the digital inclusion issue, what we saw happening during COVID was students or families turning to meals. There were students and families attending the public education system, turning to meals to take out loans so that they could continue their education. So while meals is an absolute essential resource, it's fantastic, it's simply not good enough. And digital access is just one of many examples where Tasmanians turn to the community sector and to other means borrow money to essentially buy themselves essential services. So just a way to reinforce, encourage your government and ministers around you to see essential services as exactly that. We shouldn't need to borrow money to access them.
I'll just take that on board, Charlie. Thank you very much for raising that.
thank you. And thank you. Before we close, I really appreciate thank you for coming on today. We really appreciate your time. And before we close, I'd just like to finally thank the TasCOSS team, last but not least, a really incredible group of individuals who just embody the TasCOSS values of integrity, compassion and influence at all the time. So I'm very proud to be part of the TasCOSS team. Thank you to everyone who came along in person. Thank you to you, Minister Jaensch. And thank you to those that have joined us online for the first time this year. Thank you for our Auslan interpreter. And we really look forward to gathering with you again next May for the next state budget. Those of you that are still here, that are loving to stay and have a drink and some nibbles with us. And those of you that have joined online, thank you for coming, and we hope you will have a good evening. Thanks, everyone.